Ever started a project, maybe like a small one, and then suddenly it's like, whoa, how'd this get so big?
Yeah, like way bigger than you ever imagined.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into this whole idea. It's called scope creep,
Scope creep.
and it sounds kind of boring when you just say the name like that, but trust me, it's a really interesting topic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating how this tiny little thing, like, it's been described as like a slow leak in a ship.
Right.
Like, it just seems like this small problem, but then suddenly the whole project's like underwater.
Yeah, and it affects so much more than just like the budget.
Oh,
It
yeah.
could really mess with uh, team morale,
Client trust.
relationships.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're going to get into a real world example of this later on.
Mm.
Remember the HealthCare.gov website launch back in 2013?
Oh, how can we forget?
Yeah, that was a prime example of scope creep gone wrong.
Absolutely. It perfectly illustrates how these hidden costs of scope creep, they go way beyond just the financial implications.
So let's break that down. What are some of those costs?
Well, like you mentioned, team morale. Imagine you're working on a project and the scope keeps changing. Every day there's a new demand, a new feature that needs to be added.
Right.
It can be exhausting.
And not only that, it makes you feel like what you're doing doesn't even matter anymore because like the goalposts keep moving.
Exactly. You lose that sense of accomplishment. And then there's client trust.
Right, because they signed on for one thing
Exactly.
and now they're getting something completely different.
Right. They feel like the project has veered off course and they start to lose faith in your ability to deliver what you promised.
And that can really damage long-term relationships.
Oh, absolutely. If a company or even an individual gets a reputation for constantly having scope creep in their projects, it's like a red flag. For potential clients, word gets around and it can really hurt their chances of getting future work.
So, like we talked about earlier, the HealthCare.gov launch, what a mess that was. I think it was supposed to cost like less than $100 million originally.
Yeah, something like $93.7 million.
But because of all the changes and additions and everything, it
That's
ended up costing
$1.7 billion.
with a B.
With a B, a huge difference.
It's insane.
And the website didn't even work properly when it launched. There was so much public outrage, and it really damaged people's trust in the whole initiative.
Yeah. So we know scope creep is a bad thing.
It's a big problem.
But the good news is we can prevent it.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about being proactive.
So how do we do that? What are some things we can do?
Well, our research has shown that communication is key. It's like building a house. You wouldn't start building without detailed blueprints, right?
Of course not.
So in a project, you need something similar, something called a project charter.
Project charter.
It basically defines everything. The scope of the project, what you're actually going to deliver, the timeline, the budget, all of that.
Everybody has to agree on that, right?
Exactly. Everybody involved needs to be on the same page from day one. And if something needs to be changed, it needs to be discussed and agreed upon by everyone.
Makes sense. So no more like surprise additions to the blueprint without everybody signing off on it.
Exactly.
But what about when, a change does seem like it's actually a good idea? Like
Yeah.
how do you decide if it's worth it to change the scope?
That's where you need to quantify the hidden costs.
Quantify the hidden.
Yeah. So for example, let's say a client asks for a new feature. It seems small, right?
Uh-huh.
But you need to really think about it. Okay, how many extra hours will this take? Will it push back other deadlines? Will it affect team morale?
Right.
And even the budget, like how much is this going to cost? By putting actual numbers to these hidden costs, you can have a much more rational discussion with the stakeholders.
Right, because then it's not just like, oh, this would be nice.
Exactly.
It's just like, okay, but is it actually worth it?
Right. You can make a more informed decision.
Have you ever had to deal with scope creep in your own work?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Early in my career, I was working on website redesign. We had a solid plan, everything laid out, but then it started. The small tweaks,
Yeah.
just, add a section here, a new button there.
It seems small,
It seems small.
but it adds up.
But suddenly we were weeks behind schedule.
Oh, no.
The team was stressed. The client was getting frustrated. It was a mess.
Yeah.
I learned a really valuable lesson from that. Sometimes you have to say no.
Stick to the original vision.
You have to stick to the original vision, even when it's tough.
Now, for our listeners out there, think about your own lives. Have you ever, volunteered for something Maybe it seemed small at first, but then it just became this huge thing.
Yeah, or maybe a home improvement project that got way out of hand.
Oh, I've been there. It's amazing how quickly things can spiral out of control.
It really is. And, it's not just individual projects. It's worth thinking about how this idea of scope creep plays out on a larger scale.
Oh, yeah.
Like government programs, technological advancements, even our personal goals. How often do we set out to achieve something, but then we keep adding and revising until we've completely lost sight of the original objective?
That's a really interesting thought. So it's like, it's not just about managing projects, it's about managing our lives in a way.
Exactly.
And if you want to dive even deeper into this whole scope creep thing, we've got some great resources linked in the show notes. Be sure to check those out.
Yeah, and the key takeaway here is awareness.
Awareness.
If you understand the hidden costs of scope creep and you use those proactive strategies we talked about, you can avoid those project disasters.
And keep your projects and maybe even your life on track.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
See ya.